The United Nations Climate Change Conference COP27 closed yesterday after 2 weeks of negotiations and discussions. It was the second longest COP in history, and like other COPs, there were no drastic decisions agreed upon. I can't imagine it being easier considering 200 countries with different scenarios and national priorities come together to meet to a global agreement. Given the urgency of the climate change problem, every year we hope for some miracles. COP27 brings certain micro miracles for us to rely on and carry forward with.
In the words of Professor Salim ul Haq from Bangladesh, this COP27 would have been a failure of loss and damage if a fund for loss and damage were not established. To that end, it's indeed positive news that the delegates agreed on its establishment. What this means is that the developing world are now at least on the same page as developed countries with regard to accounting for historical emissions. We hope that this would not be seen as some sort of charity, but as reparations that the developed countries owe the developing world.
A transition committee was established to help with the recommendations on matters relating to the loss and damage fund. While it is an important step towards achieving global climate justice, various aspects related to its measurement, accessibility, and contributors are yet to be discussed at the next COP. India initially was one of the demanders of this fund, however, it may not benefit from it. This is due to the fact that India, being a developing country, is still a major global economy. Since many aspects of the fund are yet to be discussed, India's stake is still unclear.
The World Meteorological Organization released an executive action plan of early warning for all at COP27, calling for a 5-year investment of about $3.1 billion. India supports this initiative as adaptation encompasses better preparedness. The World Bank Group announced a Global Shield financing facility that aims to provide pre-arranged insurance and disaster protection funding. A step towards financing loss and damage, to be sure, but as there is no clarity around how much of the fund will be grants, some of the vulnerable countries are wary of it.
Among the many firsts at COP27, the establishment of the Loss and Damage Fund to support adaptation pathways of vulnerable nations is very notable. Additionally, the renewal of the pledge towards Adaptation Fund amounting to about $230 million is a positive move. Also at COP27, the Global Stocktake, the second technical dialogue happened, and this hopefully by COP28 will provide a clear idea on how the effectiveness of adaptation implementation could be improved. The final goal being increase in resilience capacities by 2030. But what's lacking as of today and what's extremely crucial to realize this resilience goal is a clear and robust, contextually placed framework.
India strongly opposed developed countries' efforts to extend the scope of mitigation to agriculture through its Kanavya Joint Work on Agriculture and pointed out the developed nations' luxury emission and our marginal farmers' survival emission. This Kanavya Joint Work on Agriculture focused to mainstream agriculture into UNFCCC processes and drive transformation in agriculture and food systems and address the synergies and trades-off between adaptation, mitigation, and agriculture productivity, while in most of the developing countries, including India, small and marginal farmers, the invisible pillars of our economy, are still starve and brave the climate challenges like anything. India wants to withstand with its farmers as this framework affects the small farmers' decision on their ground and ultimately the foundation of their food security.
With that segue into mitigation, yes, particularly for agriculture, there is a lot of synergy between adaptation and mitigation actions. Especially for a country like India, transitioning to sustainable food systems without compromising food security is a priority and should feature heavily in our long-term strategy. We need to understand what it takes to make this transition, for example, shifting to crops that are more climate resilient, less demanding of resources such as water, or building a robust precision irrigation systems, etc., in terms of technology, policy, and behavioral aspects.
How we manage agriculture will also impact various other sectors, including forestry. India's target of creating additional carbon sink of 2.5 to 3 billion tons through expansion of forest and tree cover requires land. So do various other strategies such as food security, increasing solar and wind energy, and the growing urbanization. It is thus important to understand the crosstalk between these various sectors, how land is allocated to them, and thus our ability to achieve these targets. India joining the Mangrove Alliance for Climate at COP27 is a positive and optimistic step towards tapping into the vast potential of wetlands and thus inching closer towards achieving our forestry targets.
To limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial level, we need to reduce global emission by 43% by 2030 from 2019 values. However, developed countries have not done enough, whether it's emission cut or climate finance commitments. The final draft recognized that a global transformation to low carbon economy is expected to require an investment of at least $4 to $6 trillion per year. But it did not outline the new and binding target for climate finance. For India, climate finance will be imperative to achieve its enhanced NDC goals of producing 50% of its electricity from non-fossil sources by 2030, reduce carbon emission by 1 billion tons until 2030, adapt to unavoidable impact of climate change, and transition to net zero emission by 2070.
India proposed phasing down of all fossil fuel, but it did not make it to the final cover text. Developed countries do not want to give up on oil and gas yet, even if it is required to limit the global temperature by 1.5 degrees Celsius. India cannot phase out coal in next 2 to 3 decades, but we have a plan to increase the share of solar and wind energy, as mentioned in the National Electricity Plan, which is in line with India's enhanced NDC targets.
So not just the power sector, industries also depend on coal. So at COP27, countries representing over 50% of the global GDP, including India, have launched a 12-month action plan to make clean technologies more affordable and accessible. So this basically includes 25 sector-specific priority actions to decarbonize the steel, power and transport sectors and to scale up low-emission hydrogen technologies. Now this action plan also includes ramping up infrastructure projects including at least 100 hydrogen valleys and at least 50 large-scale net zero emission industrial plants.
India's long-term strategy, which was unveiled at COP this year, mentions establishing a carbon pricing mechanism as part of its push for energy efficiency. Evidence from carbon pricing schemes around the world shows that carbon pricing is useful as a tool to encourage efficient use of established technologies, but not so much for systems transformation unless it comes with other non-market policies like investment in renewables and research and development in low-carbon technologies. So while this is a welcome step, it's not a substitute for investment in innovation and deployment of low-carbon technologies. And additionally, the carbon pricing policy must be designed in such a way that it accounts for unintended equity issues, energy security issues, and it mobilizes more financial resources.
There was an expectation that in COP27, rules of engagement in international carbon market under Paris Agreement will be defined and agreed upon. COP27 did not give companies and countries on how to implement carbon market in a way that prioritize accounting standards with transparency and environmental integrity. India has established its own domestic carbon market, which will be voluntarily first and then cap and trade system later. But a fully developed carbon market is going to take a while.
Keeping justice at the heart of any transition is very important so that nobody gets left behind and nobody has to unfairly pay for the changes, especially given the fact that the impacts of climate change are not equally distributed. So towards this, in the coming year, we hope for concrete developments on operationalizing the L&D fund, increased and binding targets on climate finance from the developed world, and reaching a consensus on phasing down all fossil fuels, not just coal.
For India, we hope for a comprehensive just energy transition plan and the finance for it to help coal dependent communities move towards other livelihoods.